She had 1 hour, not a free afternoon, not a quiet weekend, not the luxury of uninterrupted days that some people have, and most people do not. Just 1 hour, every morning before her husband woke, before the children stirred, before the village outside her window began the noise of its ordinary day. 1 hour that belonged entirely to her and to the thing she was building in it. Her neighbors said she was wasting her time. Her sister said the idea would never work. The women at the market said nothing to her face, and everything behind her back. Eleanor heard all of it. And she rose every morning 1 hour before the rest of her world woke up, and she built anyway. There is an old saying that a river does not ask permission from the mountain before it carves its way through it. It simply flows every day without stopping, without explaining itself to the mountain, and in time the river always wins. This is Eleanor's story, and the 1 hour she carved from every morning that nobody could take from her, and nobody could see coming. If this is already speaking to something in you, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one, and share this with someone who has been told their dream is too small to matter. Stay with me. This one's is for you.
Eleanor was 28 years old, and she had an idea that everyone around her had a reason to dismiss. It was not a grand idea. It was not the kind of idea that fills a room with excitement when it is spoken out loud. It was the quiet, modest idea of a woman who had noticed a gap between what her village needed and what was available to it, and had thought carefully about whether she could fill it. She wanted to make and sell preserves, not just any preserves, the kind her grandmother had made, recipes that had been passed down through 3 generations in small handwritten notebooks that Eleanor had kept in the drawer beside her bed since her grandmother died. Recipes that produced something genuinely different from what was available at the market. Something that tasted the way old things taste when they have been made by someone who understood them completely. The idea was modest. The execution would require time she did not obviously have. She had a husband who worked long hours and came home needing a meal and rest. She had 2 young children who needed everything children need, which is more than most people remember until they have them. She had a home to keep and a garden to tend, and the 1,000 small tasks of a woman's life in a village that did not pause to ask whether she had time for them. She did not have time, and she decided to find it anyway. There is a parable about a woman who wanted to fill a jar with water but had no vessel to carry it from the well. Her neighbor said, "You cannot carry water without a vessel." The woman looked around her. She found a large leaf. She folded it carefully into a shape that could hold a small amount. She walked to the well and back, carrying her small amount. She made that walk 300 times. Her neighbor watched all 300 walks from the window and said, "I do not understand why she does not simply get a vessel." But the woman had no vessel. What she had was a leaf and the willingness to walk 300 times, and her jar was full. Eleanor had no spare time. What she had was 1 hour, and the willingness to use it every morning without exception. She looked at her day carefully, the way a woman looks at a small piece of cloth and decides where to cut so that nothing is wasted. The hour was there, between the time she would naturally wake and the time the house woke with her. 1 hour that was neither here nor there, an hour that slipped into the start of the day, unnoticed, absorbed into the general preparing and the general beginning. neither used nor particularly missed. She claimed it, not dramatically. She simply set her mind to waking 1 hour earlier than the household, and she did it. The first morning was harder than she expected. The second was slightly less hard. The third, she was already beginning to find what would become, over time, something she did not have a word for yet. The particular piece of an hour that belongs entirely to you in a life that belongs mostly to everyone else. She began her first batch of preserves on a Wednesday morning before the sun came up. The kitchen was dark except for the fire and the single candle she had set on the table. The house was completely still around her. The children sleeping, Thomas sleeping, the village outside the window sleeping. Just Eleanor and the fire and the recipes in her grandmother's handwriting and the first hour of what would become something that none of the women at the market had yet thought to take seriously. One hour a day is 365 hours in a year. Eleanor did not think of it this way in the beginning. She thought of it as one morning at a time, one batch at a time, one jar filled and sealed and set on the shelf at a time. But time was thinking of it differently. Time was doing what time always does for the person who shows up consistently and faithfully and without interruption. It was compounding everything. There is a parable about a man who planted one seed every morning in a field that his neighbors said was too rocky and too dry to grow anything worth harvesting. They watched him plant for 1 year and said, "You are wasting your mornings." They watched him plant for 2 years and said, "You are a stubborn fool." They watched him plant for 3 years and said nothing at all, because by the 3rd year, the field was producing something so abundant and so undeniable that the words had quietly died in their mouths. The field had not changed. The soil was still rocky. The conditions were still imperfect. What had changed was the number of seeds in the ground. Eleanor's first year was the year of learning. She made mistakes that wasted ingredients she could not easily replace. She made batches that did not set correctly and had to be remade. She made jars that she did not sell because they were not yet good enough and gave them quietly to neighbors who received them without understanding what they were tasting, or that they were tasting the early education of a woman who would one day be known across 3 villages for the quality of what came from her kitchen. She told almost nobody what she was doing. Thomas knew. He had noticed the early rising and the extra jars on the shelf and had asked her once, with the gentle curiosity of a man who loves his wife and trusts her judgment, even when he does not fully understand it. She had told him simply, and he had nodded and said nothing more about it. His silence was not dismissal. It was the particular respectful silence of a man who has learned that his wife's quiet decisions usually produce things worth being quiet about. Margaret, the neighbor, noticed the jars on the windowsill and asked about them, and Eleanor said simply that she had been making preserves, and Margaret said, with the particular intonation of a woman who has already decided what she thinks and is merely confirming it. Eleanor did not elaborate. In the second year, the quality shifted, not in a moment. In the slow, particular way that quality shifts when it has been earned through 100 corrections and 100 attempts and 100 mornings of doing the same thing slightly better than the morning before. There is no shortcut to this kind of quality. It cannot be purchased or performed or rushed into existence. It is built one morning at a time by someone who refuses to stop until the thing in their hands is the thing they were trying to make. By the middle of the second year, Eleanor's preserves were being requested by name, not by the village, not yet, by 2 households who had tasted them and said something to someone who had said something to someone else in the particular quiet, organic way that genuine quality always travels. 1 jar became 2 orders. 2 orders became 5. 5 became a small, regular arrangement with the merchant at the edge of the market, who had tasted them himself and understood immediately that what he was tasting was not ordinary. Eleanor bought a second set of jars with the first money she earned. She told Thomas that evening with the particular expression of someone presenting not just a jar, but 3 years of early morning hours and everything they had been building toward. Thomas looked at the jar for a long moment. Then he looked at his wife, and he said, "I should have asked more questions the first morning you woke before me." Eleanor smiled. By the 3rd year, the 1 hour had become 2, not because she had taken more time from the household, because the business had grown enough to justify hiring a young woman from the village to help with the afternoon work, freeing Eleanor's 1 hour to become the hour it had always been trying to become. The hour of someone who knows exactly what they are doing because they did it badly every morning for 2 years before they did it well. By the end of the 3rd year, Eleanor's preserves were known across 3 villages. The merchant had expanded her arrangement to a formal supply agreement. The women who had spoken at the market said nothing now when Eleanor passed, not because they had changed, but because the thing they had been speaking about had changed in a way that made their earlier words look exactly like what they had always been. The opinion of people who were watching from windows while someone else made 300 trips to the well. Margaret stopped Eleanor on the street one afternoon. She said, "I did not think it would come to this." Eleanor looked at her with complete warmth and said, "I know." Not unkindly, just honestly. Then she went home to her kitchen and her grandmother's recipes and the hour that had built everything, and she rose the next morning 1 hour before the world woke up, because that was who she was now, not because she had to, because the hour had become hers in a way that nothing could take back. Eleanor never asked for more time than she had. She simply decided to use what was already there. 1 hour, every morning, before the world woke up and made its demands, and that 1 hour repeated faithfully every single day without exception became the most powerful force in her life. Not because 1 hour is a long time, but because 1 hour multiplied by 365 days, multiplied by 3 years of consistent showing up, becomes something that cannot be ignored. It becomes a result.
There is something sitting in the corner of your life right now. You know what it is. The thing you have been meaning to begin. The dream you have been meaning to water. You do not need a free afternoon. You do not need perfect conditions. You need 1 hour. Find it. Claim it. Show up to it every single morning without negotiation. And watch what 3 years of 1 faithful hour quietly builds. The 1 hour was never just an hour. It was the whole life Eleanor was building. 1 morning at a time. Start tomorrow. 1 hour. That is all.